if your New York Giants are ever going to get off this backwards losing treadmill that they've been on for most of the last 12 years or so, they're going to have to start winning more games in the NFC East. And that means one of the teams that they're going to have to beat more regularly is the Dallas Cowboys. And as we approach the 2025 season, we're trying to preview those NFC East teams. And here to help me do that today on the Valentine's Views podcast is RJ Ochoa of SB Nation's Blogging the Boys, the great RJ Ochoa, who always comes on and has been a good friend of the show, despite the fact that he roots for the wrong team.
Ed, great to be with you. You said start beating them regularly. Talking about the Giants and the Cowboys, I would posit that maybe start beating them generally is a more apt term, just because they quite literally haven't done so. That's made 2 stress-free weeks for me. Really, I've been working with you now for 7 years. And that entire run, you know what I mean? These are one-way conversations as far as I'm concerned.
All right, we're done. Show's over. We've had enough. All right. It's funny because I was in transit from my home up here to our summer place, and I didn't have an opportunity to look up what the record has been over those last few years. I know it's not good from a Giants perspective, not at all. But let me ask you this. Let's just start right there. You said they're 2 stress-free weeks, or have been for the most part, for the last 7, 8, 10 years, whatever it is. And do you look at the 2025 Giants, from the outside and what the Cowboys should be this year? Do you still look at that as 2 weeks that should be stress-free?
I think that it's a risk doing that always, right? Like I'd be lying to you if I actually truly felt that way. Especially, a Thanksgiving game or something like that kind of elevates the attention and the stress or whatever. And so the Cowboys have been fortunate. There's no doubt about it. I feel confident is maybe the best way to say it. I would take the Cowboys obviously over the Giants. And I know that obviously when you and I discuss this, it's relative to the Cowboys and Giants specifically. And I know that it's very, very difficult for people to objectively talk about Dak Prescott because he's the quarterback of the Cowboys, but he has had a lot of success within the division at large. He's got winning records against all 3 teams. Obviously, he's been most successful against the Giants. That isn't to say the Cowboys have won the Super Bowl or Dak as a top 5 quarterback, but again, more often than not, Cowboys teams quarterbacked by Dak, beat their division rivals. And so in that sense, I really trust him and trust them against any of these teams, any of the 6 games they play every year. I don't know that the Giants have done anything that, really startles me relative to 2025 specifically. Obviously, I think that, the Giants aren't heading 180 degrees south anymore. But I think it is still, going to be a little while before they're completely and totally heading due north, if that makes sense.
I do think, you talk about Dak, and I do think any of the games the Giants have won against Dallas have come without Dak Prescott at quarterback in recent years. Is that, I believe that's correct.
That's correct. The Giants, as you will recall, swept the Cowboys Dak's rookie year in 2016. And ever since then, it's been any victory has come against a non-Dak led team. Andy Dalton in the 2020 season finale, when there was all that drama about Philly, tanking and whatnot. It's just, Cooper Rush has obviously had some success in that stretch as well. And I guess maybe where I, come from the standpoint of joking is, when I was younger, when we were all younger, obviously, the Cowboys games against the Giants were insane. Those were by far the ones that I stressed the most over. Even though it was Eli and all that stuff, like it felt like they were Tony Romo's Achilles heel. And so I will forever recall the kind of heroic wins they pulled off against the Giants and that he did. Everybody remembers the Odell catch game and how Dallas won that at the end. The one that is always seared into my mind is the game at, I guess it would have been the Meadowlands in 2006, when Martin Gramatica kicked the game-winning field goal and the Giants were wearing those red get-ups that they used to don from time to time. So to
Don't
go
remind me about those.
I
I
loved
don't.
them.
I hated those. Don't remind me about the red.
But to go from that, right? To go from like, man, these are two battles every year to just, again, you can kind of close your eyes and simulate to the end of this has been a stark contrast over the last now 20 years. But yeah, they for the most part, Dak Prescott has absolutely owned this team.
Well, we will root for Joe Milton or Will Greer to be at quarterback this year.
I would still trust them. I mean, and it's spanned different head coaches, right? It was Jason Garrett or Mike McCarthy. Obviously, now we'll see about Brian Schottenheimer, but it is at the very least, I think you can argue the Giants are due, right? Like at a certain point, this does have to end. If the Giants are, Dak Prescott's Buffalo Bills and he's their Tom Brady, I mean, so be it. But at some point, it would stand to reason this run will come to an end.
It does. I'm always interested in the outside perspective of the Giants. Now, from our perspective, covering this team every day and knowing where this team is coming from, 9-25 the last 2 years, 3-14 last year. Albeit the 2 losses to Dallas they weren't exactly blowout losses. Right. 2 losses to Washington by a total of 8 points, but they're losses. And the record is 3-14. I have said in reviewing the Giants position by position, from quarterback, all the way through every position on defense, I have said that you can make an argument that they're either clearly better or potentially better at every position across the roster. The question is, with the schedule, with how far they have to go, how much is it going to matter? But from the outside, what I'm curious about is your perspective on what the Giants have done this offseason, just the moves that they've made and whether you think they've actually, gotten better.
Yeah, I first of all, I think context is necessary, and I'm happy to hear that you obviously, I know you do, you view things, no pun intended, that way, and that is worth mentioning, even with regards to the Cowboys Giants, games over the last however many years. I mean, there's a Tommy DeVito blowout game in there, right? Like the Giants have been kind of stumbling at quarterback, and that's helped boost this record for Dak Prescott. But I agree with you that they're better and their prospects are better. I don't know that that they're a playoff contender. I know that we're now only 3 years removed, from them being one and being a playoff game winner. But I think it's a lot of unproven. I think we all expect Abdul Carter to be amazing, probably right away. Micah Parsons, who I always say you were the only person who believed. I did not, and many did not. Ed Valentine knew that. I will vouch for that. He knew that Micah would become what he has. And so perhaps you were prophetic way back when with regards to Carter. I mean, I just don't know how much of a difference that makes. And so I guess if I have to put on my troll hat, the thing I'm most excited about with regards to the Giants is that they're still not on one wavelength, seemingly. That is the outside perspective, right? You've got this head coach and GM that are seemingly at the end of their rope. And you've got now this new quarterback who is seemingly the dawn of a new era. And so I know we all feel the same with regards to whoever we root for, that all those properties should be on the same timeline. And so it does seem fairly possible, some would say likely, that Brian Dable and Joe Schoen are out this year. And now you have to find and hunt and search for a new coach and a new GM that are going to be willing to work with Jackson Dart. And I have a lot of questions about Jackson Dart. I mean, what's he going to look like? I mean, is it going to translate? Is this really going to finally work out? The Daniel Jones thing felt dead on arrival to me. It never felt like that was anything to ever really worry about. And obviously that bore itself out to be true. I think that, there are a lot of players that could work and could hit. I'm an Arizona State Sun Devil, and so I'm devastated that Cam Scadaboo is a New York Giant. I think that is, I mean, he truly is a culture changer, and that could really be something that clicks for this team. And to have that happen in parallel with Dart and his this is a team maybe on the rise. I hate to say things like a process or whatever is taking place, but maybe a year from now, you could see them, all maturing kind of in their sophomore, junior season and challenging as an overall collective.
The weird part of it is that you go back to 2022 and Brian Daboll winning Coach of the Year, Daniel Jones having his best year, the Giants making the playoffs, and you can clearly, I think, make an argument that was the worst thing that happened to Joe Schoen
Totally.
and Brian Daboll, because I think what happened was, I don't think they had any intention of bringing back Daniel Jones. In fact, I know they didn't. I've talked to Joe Schoen about this. But what happened was Daniel Jones put them in a situation where, knowing the way ownership felt about them, they had no choice. They had to bring Daniel Jones back, knowing the way John Mara felt about Daniel Jones. Then they went out and they did some things that you wouldn't do in really year two of a rebuild, or your first full season with your coaching staff, with your front office in place, trading for Darren Waller, bringing in, probably some other veteran players. I can't even remember who they brought in other than Waller at this point, but
Kenny Galladay.
Well, that was Gettleman before Joe Schoen.
That's true. That's true.
But to me, it's weird. And tell me if you think this is right, because it feels like right now the Giants are in the place where they should have been entering the 2023 offseason. And the weird part about that is John Mara, having gotten their quarterback in Dart that they're going to try to go forward with. The weird part about that is where Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen are in year 4 and whether they're going to get to continue. Because normally you would think they would have a longer runway, but because it's year 4, it just feels like they're where they should have been in year 2.
I do think that's fair. I think that the success in 22 was certainly detrimental to the overall project. And you could argue that, like, if you boiled it down to like the actual worst thing was probably drawing the Vikings in a kind of a paper tiger in that sense, and being able to beat them in the playoffs, because now it's not only did you make the playoffs, but you got a playoff win over this robust team on the road, etc. And so, yeah, like it can be a hindrance to over deliver on step 1, because that warps your perception. I agree with that. And so, yeah, I mean, it makes sense that you would just now be like turning off the 30,000 foot light and unbuckling your seatbelt to get your iPad out, right? Like, as opposed to, starting the descent the way they were in actuality in 2023. So I agree with that, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know, the Giants have, I struggle with the way the Cowboys are viewed nationally, because I'm sure you agree, because of the brand the Giants are and obviously where they play, but because it isn't objective. People lean so much into the meme of it all, into the same old type of things, when there's actual more context to that discussion. And I think that's true with the Giants, and that's I know I personally said that paying Daniel Jones, what they did was fair. They did not,
absolutely,
they did not reset the market. They did not do anything extravagant. They paid him what made sense and what was logical, particularly, to your point, based off of what they were coming off of. That was fair. But in hindsight, people again just kind of beat the drum of like, oh, can you believe they paid Daniel Jones over Saquon Barkley? Yeah, I can, because for a decade at that point, we had been killing teams for paying running backs, and it made sense to let Saquon walk. It is really unfortunate that, for the Giants, obviously, that what happened with Saquon that doesn't make the process of it all wrong. And so I think that that's probably what's been the most important thing for the Giants, is to accept that you're not, this team that won 2 Super Bowls in a 4-year stretch, that you have to kind of, or 5-year stretch, whatever it was, that you have. And this has always been my challenge to the Cowboys. Like, you might be a Tiffany brand, you might be a blue blood in the NFL. That doesn't do anything for you right now. Like, if this were college football, you would not be inside the top 25 just because your name is the New York Giants. You would have to climb that mountain all over again. And at the very least, it seems like John Mara has finally realized that.
We can hope. It was just so weird this offseason, because John Mara, when he brought Schoen and Daboll back, when he made that announcement, he didn't seem thrilled about it, and yet he said, I need to feel better. We need to be better. And yet the biggest thing we need to accomplish this offseason is to put a quarterback of the future in place. And those two things don't necessarily go together. I think Joe Shane managed to thread that needle this offseason, but that's a hard situation, a hard task to hand your coach and your GM.
Yeah, and it makes you. I know this is hard to do with a first round quarterback because there's nothing but optimism surrounding him. But from an outside perspective, it makes me question. Would they have taken Dart if these were, if this was a head coach and a GM with more job security? Would they have forced this issue? Because to your point, if the number one goal is emerging from 2025 with an established franchise quarterback, I mean, it does kind of make that decision for you. It does kind of at least cast a blanket of doubt over this, maybe not a blanket, but a cloud of doubt over the situation. And that's the other thing, like, it does seem like the Giants have just been unable to stick to something, to have any conviction in anything. Another move the Giants made that I agreed with at the time, and this is way back, way predating these two men, was benching Eli in favor of Geno Smith. And they got, I mean, better than I do, they got railed for that. They got destroyed for that. This is a team that has, more than the Cowboys, in my opinion at least, hung on to the past and clutched their pearls over how dare you, violate the sacred Giant way. And they've been unwilling to kind of adapt and evolve and change their ways. And I think that has been modified at least. And maybe some of that has been, being humbled a little bit, but correct me if I'm wrong or update me, please. Didn't John Mara explore selling a minority share in the Giants the way that Jeffrey Lurie did with the Eagles? I mean, like, that in and of itself is a willingness to evolve in a way that the Cowboys don't have. Ed, you would have to pry 0.01% share of the Cowboys away from Jerry and Stephen Jones. There's no way they would be. And for your audience, the reason this is a logical move for franchises is that the net worth of these teams has now way exceeded what one singular person or family can hold in wealth. And so what Jeffrey Lurie has done is sell off minority shares to get an influx of cash to be able to, pay out massive signing bonuses to bring in players in free agency and ultimately keep the team competitive. And it seems like the Giants at the very least are trying. I will give them that. They've just missed.
Right.
And sometimes that's what happens.
Yeah, in terms of the ownership question, yes, the Giants are still trying to sell like an 8 to 10% minority share. And what people need to realize is, yes, Steve Tisch, the Tisch family that owns 50% of the business, Steve Tisch has outside interests. He's a movie producer. He does all of those things. He has other outside income. There isn't an owner in the NFL who's poor. Okay.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
There isn't. But the Mara family, John Mara, their business is the New York Giants. That's where their income comes from. They didn't come to this with billions of dollars on the outside. What they have is earned through the Giants. So that influx of cash, whatever that number might be, that influx of cash that's available out there now is, I wouldn't blame, especially the Mara family, for going after that. No question about it.
And it makes, even business ventures aside, but to your point, obviously, nobody's opposed to making money. It is a way that allows you to be competitive, to be more competitive, to at least, equal the playing field. Because if you're coveted free agent X and somebody's willing to offer you, you're getting identical contract offers from team A and team B, but team A is willing to give you this money, this cash up front. I mean, it makes the decision different. You may still choose team B if that's your prerogative, but and that's where, I know we're here to talk about the Giants, but that's where, the Cowboys have been so inactive in free agency, and it's become its own joke that it sounds preposterous because, to your point, there's no NFL owner who's poor. But because of their decision making, I've been forced to kind of follow the flow chart, and now the only logical conclusion is that they don't have the cash. They don't have the liquid assets to be able to pay these players up front, and they want to backload all these things for when more television money or whatever comes in, and they can get these offers from other teams who have minority shareholders that can come in with cash. Because again, I mean, who is the human being that can, quickly just, pull up their mattress and pull out $1 billion? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't
Right.
happen
Right.
in a quick and efficient way.
Right. So let's talk more about the Cowboys, about your team. And since we're talking about money, let's talk about Micah. And let's talk about, you're talking about cash, and we're talking about Jerry Jones, and we're talking about a guy who, you know, look, there's a if the biggest reason in my mind, the biggest reason the Dallas Cowboys haven't won a Super Bowl since 1995, and I'm not saying this in a twist the knife way, but the biggest reason is because of Jerry Jones, because Jerry wants all the credit. He wants to be the guy that makes all of the decisions. And one of the decisions that I just don't understand with Jerry, and he does this time after time after time. He did it with Dak. He does it with, with big name player after big name player. He could have given Micah Parsons a contract a year ago, 2 years ago. And now he's watching the market get set. He's watching edge defender after edge defender get more money than they've ever made. He's going to watch Trey Hendrickson make a gazillion dollars here pretty soon. And then he's still going to have to pay Micah Parsons a gazillion and a half dollars because he waited and he waited and he waited. Why do you think Jerry continues to do this?
Well, like I said, I mean, there are only two logical possibilities now, and maybe my sin is trying to inject logic in a world void of it. I think that's probably ultimately the answer. But you mentioned that they did it with Dak. They've done it with Dak twice. They very, very infamously let Dak go into the final year of his rookie contract in 2019. Then they tagged him in 2020 and let him go into that. He shattered his ankle against the Giants, and he still got the wealthiest contract in team and NFL history. And then they did it again last year. To your point, and they obviously did it with CeeDee Lamb a year ago. In case anyone forgot, it took until basically training camp was over to get the CeeDee Lamb deal done a year ago. It took until the day the season began. The Sunday morning of week 1 was when the Dak deal got done, which is insane. And to be clear, I would have killed them if they had let Dak walk, because I obviously think highly of him. But what I said a year ago, or a year and change ago, was you had to come to a point. You pick a day, July 1st. And if the deal wasn't done by then, you're not going to do it, no matter what. And you're prepared to live with the consequences, because by doing it the way you did it in quite literally the most inefficient manner possible. Like that's not an exaggeration. That's not hyperbole. It's literally the most inefficient way it could have been done. And to your point, they're doing it again with Micah. He was first eligible for an extension at the beginning of last offseason after his 3rd year of service in the NFL. They didn't get an extension done. Why, Ed? Because they were chasing Dak, because they were chasing CeeDee. And now they've spent this entire offseason somewhat chasing Micah, being silly, playing pedantic games. I don't know if you recall that this happened, but Jerry Jones said at one of the owners' meetings that he didn't know the agent's name who represents Micah Parsons. It just so happens to be David Mulugeta, the most prominent agent in the NFL, literally known for, getting these record-breaking contracts. It actually felt sad. It was such a silly ploy from Jerry's behalf that it just felt sad.
Maybe
but
Jerry just doesn't remember his name.
Maybe he doesn't. I suppose that's technically possible. But now, in dragging Micah Parsons, they have delayed themselves on paying Tyler Smith, their first-round draft pick in 2022, who's turned into one of the better interior linemen in the NFL. You would think you would want to get a jump on that. No. Deron Bland, who had the pick 6 season a couple years ago, he's eligible for an extension, entering the final year of his deal. Nope, not taking care of him. Brandon Aubrey, a little measly kicker you don't want to get ahead on. Nope, not doing that. And look, I know your question was about Micah, but I was against the George Pickens trade. I did not trust the Cowboys to be able to handle the annoyances that the Pittsburgh Steelers had clearly had enough of at that point in time, but they made the trade. Fine. Now my job is to evaluate it. And my job, Ed, is to say, well, extend him. He's entering the final year of his contract right now. Why are you going to play with this fire after you're dealing with the whole plan is predicated on him delivering for you? I likened it to when the Eagles traded for AJ Brown. I don't know if you recall, that was during the NFL draft, and he had an extension immediately with the team. And so they just continue to delay and delay and delay. And it's either they're this incompetent, they don't have the liquid cash, or, and some people believe and subscribe to this logic, they like the attention, and they do it so that people like you and people like me and people on First Take and Get Up or whatever will, in the deep of August, when we should be talking about the Eagles getting ready to raise the banner, pontificate and wonder about, when is the Micah Parsons extension going to happen? It's silly, because if there's a team that needs attention, it is not the Dallas Cowboys. But again, what other logical conclusion can you draw?
It's just the Pickens trade. You don't make that trade. You don't make a trade for a big player like that who's entering his final year. You don't do that without an extension in hand. You just don't.
And the same.
That's what the Giants did that with Brian Burns. I mean,
yeah,
we can talk
exactly.
about whether they overpaid him or not. But if you're going to make that trade, you make that trade with an extension in hand, and Joe Shane did that.
And if you don't, or the reason you do is because if you don't, you're betting against yourself, whether you realize it or not. And that's what they have done time and time again. Like, we used to say this with Dak Prescott, because unfortunately at Blog on the Boys, we have a lot of experience with this. But I mean, like, getting a deal on him would be him sucking, right? Like, if George Pickens were terrible this year, do you think the front office would be like, hell yeah, now we can pay him less? No, like, your goals run in parallel with one another. Like your success literally hinges upon him having success. So why would you not plan for that? And where I struggle with our fan base is, again, I was against the trade, but I've made my peace with it. I've squared it, and I'm excited about it. And I've determined that, okay, you've crossed this line. Now the logical move is to extend him. But there are people, Ed, who believe what you offered about Micah and Dak and CD, and how could you be so late on paying all these guys? Those same people in the very next breath will say, well, I want to see George Pickens prove it. Why? Then why did you give up a third round pick? If you need to see it proven out, then why were you willing to make the trade in the first place?
If you've given up a third round pick, you've seen him prove it. Yes,
exactly.
Yes, he's a diva.
Yeah, but he's even.
But how many really good wide receivers aren't divas? All right, how many of them aren't?
He's annoying, but he's not a criminal. He's never been arrested. He's never been in trouble with the law. So, but even if he were, even if whatever demerits you wanted to hang around him, you made the trade, right? Like,
right, you made the trade.
Yeah.
So so you can't be one and done with the guy. You just can't.
And again, I know that your question was about Micah, but within the Pickens conundrum, people say, well, Ed, we'll just let him walk. So, and he'll get paid and we'll get a comp pick. Okay. So you're telling me that he's so good that somebody else is going to pay him and that you don't want to. You're going to thumb your nose at this idea. And so he's going to actually be so good that he's going to command a deal that's going to give you a third round compensatory pick that won't even be available to you until 2027. Like, that isn't a plan that carries much logic either. As it relates to Micah, I think the Cowboys, they said things at the beginning of this offseason, like how they wanted him to show he was a leader, which was effectively them, saying, you better not hold out. And what I said, and this was at the beginning of this offseason, the man showed up all of last year when he didn't have to. The man could have really leveraged and put you in a bind because you were late on Dak and you were late on CD. A year ago, Ed, Micah could have said, look, front office, I know you're working on Lamb. I know you're working on Prescott, but I'm not showing up to camp without a deal either because I'm eligible for the very first time. Did he do that? No. He showed up to every single thing. He played hurt. He was amazing still. And even if he hadn't been, if there was a player in the NFL who you have learned is someone you want around for the life of whatever extension you're going to sign them to, does Micah Parsons not pass that test? I mean, like, what? Again, not in trouble with the law or anything like that. He has a podcast. So what? I mean, get over yourself if this is still bothering you in 2025. He has proven time and time and time and time again that he is absolutely a cornerstone player worth paying. And the Cowboys themselves, Ed, have said, yeah, we're willing to make him the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. Then why wait? Then why to your point, why pay a gazillion 0.01 when you could pay a gazillion. And that's the difference. That is the mentality that has separated them from everybody else, to your point.
Well, the Cowboys can just continue to cowboy, and we'll enjoy that. We'll enjoy the headlines. We'll enjoy watching you get all worked up about it. So, but let me change topics. Obviously, Dallas needed to go out and find a new head coach this offseason. They ended up with Brian Schottenheimer, which was a surprise to a lot of people because we know Jerry and we know he likes to quote unquote big game hunt and all of that. And going the Brian Schottenheimer route was doing anything but that. Thoughts on Schottenheimer, thoughts on what it's looked like, what it's felt like so far, and whether you think that in the end, this is sort of an un-Cowboys-like move that might actually work out.
I think understanding the timeline of it all is important for you and for your audience. At least I imagine that's why I'm here. And so the Cowboys missed the playoffs. We all know that. And if you recall, or if you forgot, they did not make a move on McCarthy the entire week of the wild card round. There were all the reports. They're thinking, they're talking. This was the exact same playbook they followed with Jason Garrett before they didn't renew his deal, and he went on, very, very famously to be the offensive coordinator for the New York Giants under Joe Judge. But so they let McCarthy, kind of float in the wind. They embarrassed the man. I mean, it was really kind of cruel what they did to him. And by waiting that long, Ed, they costed themselves the chance to virtually interview the coordinators for the teams who held the number one seed in the conferences, which were the Detroit Lions and the Kansas City Chiefs. So they could not, by NFL rules, interview Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn or a Chiefs coordinator if you put stock in them, because they waited, because they dragged their feet. I mean, think about how stupid that is. Like, it's actually stupid that they went about it this way. But so they moved on from McCarthy the Monday of the divisional round, the day of wild card Monday night game, whatever. And of course, during halftime of that Vikings-Rams game, they leak that Dion is a candidate and all this stuff. And that's really trying to steal headlines from everybody else. And so they go that week and they don't have anything really materialize. Of course, they are connected to Kellen Moore because it's super predictable. It wasn't until the following Monday, the Monday after the divisional round was over, that Brian Schottenheimer emerged as an option. And the way he emerged as an option was not because he was reported to have an interview, but because he was suddenly the betting favorite, according to sportsbooks, according to FanDuel and DraftKings. He had not even interviewed yet for the job, and he was the betting favorite. And of course, obviously, after that, the process unfolded. The Cowboys are a team that likes to make headlines. You know that certainly very well. They announced this move that they were hiring him at 9 p.m. on a Friday night. It was almost shameful. I mean, it really kind of carried an air of shame. And so I would say the first, kind of month was just, it was like an apocalyptic sort of environment covering this team. Everybody was mad and irate about everything. During his introductory press conference, Stephen Jones, quipped at Cowboys fans and said, "This drought that people say we're in," and he used air quotes as if that weren't real, as if they
as if there wasn't a 30-year drought. Basically,
it was about as toxic of an environment as you could imagine. But then we got to the NFL Combine, which I know you're well versed in, and Brian Schottenheimer spoke and kind of began to captivate people a little bit, and notably Jerry Jones, who never speaks at the podium at the Combine, but holds court on his bus, obviously in Indianapolis. He did not speak. That was very, very, very rare for Jerry to not do that. And then the Cowboys, free agency began and they made some moves. In fact, the last 2 years before this one, they were the last team to agree to terms with an external free agent. But this year, not only were they not last, but they even got some done during the legal tampering window. They made some trades. They traded for Kenneth Murray and Kyer Elam. They went pretty chalk in the draft, but in a way that addressed their needs. And then the George Pickens trade. And all the while, Schottenheimer is kind of he's a captivating man. I mean, he's quite charming and quite, cunning in disposition. And so people have really kind of fallen for him. Now, it is, I think, important to note that what can you really accomplish by mid-July? Nothing, right? Like there's nothing you can do. But relative to the opportunities he's had to do the things that he could do, I do think that Brian Schottenheimer has passed all of the tests. But we are on the verge of actual football things happening, and that's where things are ultimately going to be proven out.
So, speaking of actual football things, obviously training camps open around the league here in a few days. Rookies have already reported with most of the teams. Uh, what are you looking forward to with Cowboys camp? What are you hoping to learn? What are the big storylines in Dallas for training camp?
I think obviously Micah's contract, but we've discussed that at length. How they approach Dak Prescott, there's no question he's the starter and things like that. But how limited is he? Is he a full go? How many veteran days does he get? I mean, at this point, you don't need Dak to install the offense, but you kind of do because you have a new head coach who's the offensive play caller. And by the way, Brian Schottenheimer was the offensive coordinator without calling plays the last 2 years, which is part of what made the whole thing so unique. Offensively, I'm also curious who the starting running back is for this team. This team went so heavy on one end of the spectrum by devoting the 4th overall pick to Zeke Elliott and then doubling down on that with a $90 million contract. And now, again, we've had the running backs don't matter arguments over and over and over again, and they don't, but they kind of do, right? Like they matter a little bit. Like you have to have some competency back there. The Cowboys running back room at the moment, Ed, consists of Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, Deuce Vaughn, if you still put any stock in that, and then rookies Jaden Blue out of Texas, who's really fast but not necessarily durable, and Phil Maffa, who's kind of a Brandon Jacobs bruiserish sort of dude. So I genuinely don't know who the quote unquote starter is or who will lead the team in carries. That is definitely the kind of biggest position to watch as far as how it's ultimately going to shake out. I would also offer if there's one, this happens that fans can be fickle. And if there's one kind of dude whose jersey people have owned that they started to turn on, it's probably Trayvon Diggs. He's had injury issues over the last couple of years. It's unknown whether or not he's going to start the season on the PUP list. And he just hasn't been the same player, because of injury, obviously. And so people are kind of out on him. They want the team to move on. Obviously, that won't be happening anytime soon. But this cornerback room is really boom or bust as well. If Trayvon's healthy, great. That's awesome. Deron Bland obviously was phenomenal 2 years ago. Can he find that form? He fractured his foot early on last year in camp, and that really kind of changed a lot of what his season looked like. The Cowboys have Savon Ravel, who they took in the 3rd round, who many people thought would be a first-round pick, if not for the injury that he suffered early on last year at East Carolina. So they have a lot of, I guess the things look good after the flop, but we're waiting to see the turn in the river to really see how this cornerback room is going to play itself out, because it could go, one of two directions.
All right, RJ, I think that's probably a pretty good place for us to call it a day here. I know that you have some other irons in the fire these days, other than blogging the boys. If you just if you want to tell people about some of that stuff before we sign off.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ed. Obviously, everything I do for blogging the boys and covering the Cowboys is par for the course and not changing in any capacity. But on the subject of golf, I know you and I were chatting about this. Been covering golf a bit for SB Nation, and we're speaking the Wednesday of Open Championship Week. So obviously, an exciting time to wrap up the major championship season. Looking forward to the Ryder Cup, kind of your neck of the woods up there at Bethpage. And so it's been fun to kind of dip my toes in those waters. And
what's the website? What's the website over there, RJ? Sorry.
That's kind of a complicated question as far as some changes that we're all undergoing, Ed. That's more of an offline conversation. But SB Nation Golf, if you Google that, that's going to get you there. That's ultimately, I think the best way. Or obviously follow me on any level of social media. And I don't know if you were also hinting at this, but I recently shared that I'm starting a master's program this fall with the University of Florida. So basically, I will ride for Kadarius Toney forever now. You know what I mean? Like I have to at this point. So looking forward.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, I mean, I have a 3.5-year-old son, so I just kind of felt like life wasn't hectic enough. But I'm grateful to have, just the most supportive and loving wife to help me in all these things, and grateful to have supportive coworkers like you who help me, figure things out and patch things together when I'm pulling my hair out a little bit.
All right, RJ, thank you as always. It's always fun and entertaining to talk to you and to talk Cowboys. So we'll be doing that again during the season. I hope, I would assume, if you're not too busy hitting the books or talking golf and all that fun stuff. So we'll get that done. But Giants fans, thank you as always for watching. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.